So we'll be presenting an interesting case of jaundice in infancy in two siblings. So this was an index child who was a 4.5-month-old female who presented with intermittent pale stools since day 15 of life. This child had jaundice with high-colored urine for the past 1 month and some pruritus for the past 15 days. With this history, she came to us. There was no history of any skin or any other side bleed, no distension of abdomen, no seizures, no encephalopathy, no history of fever. There was no clinical steatorrhea, and feeding-wise, this child was exclusively breastfed till 3.5 months and now top-fed for the past 1 month. Going to the family history, this was born to a third-degree consanguineous marriage. The first issue was an IUFD. The next was an 8-year-old who's still alive and doing well. One sibling was 5-year-old when she died. This child had a jaundice onset at 3 months.
So if you get two siblings, both affected with jaundice, and there is a history of consanguinity, why is this history of consanguinity important, and what does that convey to us?
Yeah, is that to me?
No,
Or to
anybody.
Anybody,
No
thank you. So I'll let Dr. Merchant answer
Yes,
this.
please.
Thank you. You obviously have something which is familial, genetic, and perhaps metabolic.
Okay.
It has to be familial. There are 2 children. BA is out. It doesn't happen in 2 children. You have got something probably metabolic, which is fatal. Alpha-1 antitrypsin usually should get better. So I throw alpha-1 antitrypsin out. You probably got something which is metabolic. Or who knows if you got something autoimmune which has started very early, which is again familial, and or a cholestatic syndrome. Your
Okay.
PFIC
Okay.
group of this is 1, 2, and 3. Metabolic. You want me to spell out the metabolic?
No. I just wanted for the PGs to understand that when we have a newborn or an infant with jaundice coming to us, a family history of consanguinity is extremely important because it reduces your lists of differential and gives you a direction. So go on.
So index child was a term normal delivery with a normal birth weight. Had a NICU stay for 4 days for respiratory distress at birth. The interesting part is each of the pregnancies had antenatal pruritus.
Next slide. So we have already discussed the importance of history of consanguinity. Now, Dr. Girish, what conditions will come to your mind if you have 2 children who are affected with neonatal cholestasis?
I think these are not common causes of neonatal cholestasis.
Yeah, but still if you have such a
within the
history.
neonatal cholestasis group, the first disorder that stands out, which I think Dr. Alam mentioned very clearly this morning, was PFIC, which is progressive familial intrahepatic cholestasis. The second would be Alagille's syndrome. The third will be, slightly more rarer, but then, would not fit into the clinical picture because the 5-year child, the child survived up to 5 years. But ARC syndrome, arthrogryposis renal and cholestasis syndrome, that's the third. The fourth category that comes into the mind is paroxysomal disorders, which is Zellweger's. But again, the 5-year-old child is unusual in the Zellweger's group. So those are the 4 things. There are others. I can go into mitochondrial cytopathies, but I think it's again unlikely for that child to survive till 5 years, and we don't know. We need to know a little bit more history about that 5-year-old child to
We'll
then
come
fit
to that
into that.
in the later part.
Less likely that a peroxisomal, very less likely.
So what
that
is this
a peroxisomal would survive till whatever it is, 4 years.
I
and
agree.
The other one had died at 3 months. Unlikely.
So
and you should have some faces. You should have. Well, Zellwegers have faces,
We'll go to
which
the
if you look at them,
examination.
you can diagnose them. They look like Mongols, they look like Downs. If you have a Downish looking baby and it's not a Down, think of Zellweger. So if you don't give me any features, you're not giving me clinical findings yet.
we are
You're
not
coming
giving-
to it. You're coming to clinical findings?
Yeah,
Yes,
we'll come to.
All right.
So this history of pruritus during pregnancy, what does this signify? What clue does it give to us in terms of?
I think the pruritus during pregnancy gives a clear indication that we are dealing with a child who has got probably PFIC, because certain PFICs are associated with cholestasis in pregnancy, as well as certain PFICs are associated with the history of pruritus during pregnancy.
So what history, to say that this was pruritus of pregnancy, what for the PG's benefit, when would it have when would the mother have itching and when should it stop? Like, what is classical pruritus of pregnancy, or what we call as intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy?
Is that to me again?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So I think usually it starts during the second trimester and then carries on and rapidly resolves after the delivery of the child.
So
And there's a
that's-
rapid resolution of the delivery of the child, and that's the clue really for the intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy.
One more relevant question. Like, we had this history of intrahepatic cholestasis, so we are making a diagnosis of PFIC. Are there any other relevant conditions where you'll get a maternal history and which might give you a clue to the diagnosis in the baby who's presenting to you with neonatal cholestasis?
Yes, means I think, but not where two siblings will be affected.
Yeah, but just in general.
Just
where-
in general,
yeah.
you know, because antenatal history of torch infections can be, you know, relevant in that.
Yes.
And also history of fatty liver sometimes during pregnancy, that is quite relevant, especially for some of the mitochondrial and some of the fatty acid
That's very
oxidation.
important. Yeah, let's go ahead.
So coming to the examination, the child was thriving well. The weight and height were within the centiles. Its circumference was normal. There was no dysmorphism. There was obvious icterus, no pallor, cyanosis, clubbing, or any lymphadenopathy or edema. There were no skin lesions except a few scratch marks. The systemic examination, cardiovascular, respiratory, and CNS were normal. The abdominal examination revealed a firm 3 centimeter liver with regular margins. The spleen was not palpable, and there was no evidence of any free fluid. The stool color was noted to be pale. So we have a 4.5-month-old child with neonatal cholestasis, with pale stools, with some pruritus, and a history of affected elder sibling.
So, Dr. Bhavish, what would be your differential at this point of
So I
time?
think in the initial discussion only it has been kind of narrowed down to this, everything is pointed towards an PFIC. With the more important that there is one sibling around age 8 year and supposed to be normal. So
Yeah.
the one which died, one IUFD, and there is another sibling which is around 8 year and seems to be normal. So dealing with something like an autosomal recessive disorder, having some familial history and a fatal. So it can be a part of any of these PFIC 1, 2 or 3. We need to have a gamma GT then to differentiate and other clinical parameters.
Could this be Alagille syndrome?
Faces are...
No, we have faces are not there, but does absence of faces rule out Alagille
I
syndrome?
don't think so. You have it. Presence of an absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Yeah.
So you'll have to look very carefully. Abba
So-
would remember we had a kid who we saw, and we just saw butterfly vertebra well after the child was operated for a BA, and then I think we changed it, and then we looked back, retrospectively, found a beak-shaped nose, looked back and found a PS, because for soft murmur, which is looking like an anemic murmur. So I would say yes, Alagille, and why not Alagille? And if 2 children have been with a cholestatic syndrome, I would definitely keep that word.
Girish,
Just one
can-
more point I want to throw out is that this is not BRIC. This may be
Yeah.
PFIC 2, but not BRIC 2, not the benign recurrent intrahepatic cholestasis. Why I'm saying this is because both of them have the same genetic abnormalities. So when you're chasing PFIC, am I right, sir? When you're chasing PFIC type 2, you got ABCB, where is Nehal? ABCBL, and BRIC 2 also will have, but they are benign, absolutely benign and recurrent. So that is one thing you have thrown out completely.
Would you consider bile acid synthetic defects in this, Girish? And would you consider, if I for one time forget about the cholestasis in the mother, would you consider a biliary atresia in this child?
So I think the bile acid synthetic defect gets ruled out because there is pruritus, right? You know, from the clinical history point of view, if you have a pruritus, you should probably exclude bile acid synthetic defect. And then we can go into the measurements of the bile acids, which is a different
No,
point
we're
altogether.
not going there.
Biliary atresia, again, as Sir has just mentioned, it's unlikely to happen in families. We don't see that. Even when twins occur, you don't see that. Even if monozygotic twins, you don't see that. So I think choledochal cyst, again, is a possibility in this child, but the
So keeping the family history
we are
and keeping
the
those
family
two
history,
things.
the consanguinity, and we are discussing it hepaticon, then this is not a
Yeah.
possibility.
No. But still, keeping the history of pruritus, keeping the history of intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy, your first disorder is most likely, and then we'll see what happens. Yes, any questions? Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually, Alagille syndrome will not present with pruritus and like intrahepatic cholestasis in mother.
Yeah, obviously, that's what I'm saying. That if you have that history, you don't have any other differential.
And then it
just
is
close after one. Okay.
Heterozygous directly
Yeah.
type 3. So
Yeah.
the history only gives.
Let's go to the next slide.
So on investigations, there was a mild anemia with thrombocytosis, which was probably iron deficiency related. Bilirubin was elevated. Enzymes were largely normal. Albumin and INR were preserved. GGT was 8 and alkaline phosphatase was 630.
GGT was raised?
8.
Only
8. Normal. Low.
low, in fact.
Low.
Yeah, low. Urine for non-glucose reducing substance, 2 of 3 were negative. An ultrasound showed a good size, poorly contractile gallbladder. The biliary system was normal. X-ray dorsal spine and echo were normal. What is this 2 of 3? We do 3 samples, out of them 2 were negative.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So we did a liver biopsy, which was showing a maintained lobular architecture, and there was intracellular and intracanalicular cholestasis, and bile duct paucity. Of the 11 portal tracts, only 2 showed the presence of bile ducts. There was no evidence of any cirrhosis.
Go ahead. So this, I think, has been discussed in the quiz, but when do we say that there is bile duct paucity on the histopathology? Dr. Girish?
When you see it.
No, but what is the criteria? How many portal tracts do you need, and when do we say that yes, there is? Because this is largely for the PGs.
I really feel, means, if we go on, the difficulty of interpreting bile duct paucity, and I trust my histopathologist in doing that, and counting bile ducts and making the diagnosis of bile duct paucity has its errors in it, because, the sample is always variable. Whenever there is a biliary component to it, sometimes the changes are patchy. So I think there is an inherent tendency to miscalculate things. So if you have an experienced histopathologist who looks at it and you look at it along with them, clinically correlating it, that is the best way to diagnose bile duct paucity, rather than actually measure the number of bile ducts and then see, and portal tracts and then see. But
Can I just throw in a quick comment here? Quick comment.
Pardon?
When we are looking at urinary sugars negative, you're saying, right?
Non-glucose
Non-glucose.
reducing substances.
What did you say?
Non-glucose
Reducing substances.
What have you done?
Basically for galactose.
You've done what? You've done
for
a
the
dipstick.
galactose.
You've done a dipstick, or what
We
have you
do
done?
both, sir.
Both.
So that's
Benedict's
exactly
and-
what.
Both.
For the postgraduates here, you have to do.
Both.
I mean, Dr. Amdekar and all of us here who've gone through the gamut of, in olden days when we didn't have. We did a Benedict's positive and a glucose oxidase negative.
Yeah.
We used to go for a blood sugar by Folin Wu and a blood glucose by glucose oxidase. So sugars were high and a Benedict's was positive. You got a sugar urea, which is not glucose urea, and then you changed, am I right, Dr. Amdekar? We changed galactose of fructose, and we did galactosazone and fructosazone crystals in the urine. This is just bygone, but just that it's important that you do both.
So
brings
when-
back memories of KM hospital side room before Madam Irani's ward round.
So now we have a patient where we are finding that there is cholestasis and there is a normal to low gamma GT. So if I just have this present thing, 2 information known to me, what 2 differentials would you consider? Dr. Bhavish, one we have already discussed PFIC, what would be the other one?
I think as a primary pediatrician, I think my role is to think about the most common familial causes which are recurrent and fatal. Beyond that, I will ask the pediatric hepatologist to come in patient.
So you can comment, go ahead.
No, repeat the question.
So
I
what
had
I'm
a
trying to
petit
say-
mal attack.
We are already, the bell is there, so we'll go ahead.
That's
You
not
present
fair.
the case. I
That's
think we
not
don't
fair.
have that much of time. Go ahead.
Okay, so
Quick,
the sibling had a significant antenatal pruritus, as already told, and had a fluctuating jaundice with high colored urine. She also started having intractable pruritus starting at around 6 months and with a firm liver and scratch marks. This child also additionally had extrahepatic manifestations like recurrent diarrhea. A liver biopsy showed diffuse canalicular cholestasis, paucity of bile ducts. The gamma GT was low in this child also. This child we managed with UDCA, rifampicin, and supplements. However, this child was lost to encephalopathy, and at the age of around 5 years, the child died.
Go ahead, because we have only 5 minutes.
So we have normal GGT cholestasis, pruritus, antenatal pruritus in mother, affected sibling, and biopsy showing bland cholestasis and paucity of bile ductules, with the possibility of progressive familial intrahepatic
It's the
cholestasis.
third sibling of the same family.
Pardon, this is the
Third sibling of the
Sibling.
same family.
two siblings
Second.
only.
Yeah.
This is the first one, the elder one. The second one came to us.
The first one died.
Yeah, the first one died at 5 years of age. That was the
This is
history.
the 4.5-month who now becomes 10 months.
This is
This
the
is 10 months.
sibling.
This is the sibling, sir.
The patient we are discussing is going to come now. This was the elder sibling. The time course of the illness in the elder sibling.
Oh,
So basically, how will you confirm this diagnosis? Because we have only 2 minutes, so we can't cover the rest of the questions.
So I think genetics will be the next
yeah,
step.
yeah. Go where the money is. Go where the money is. Go where the money is. The money is in genetics.
Yes.
The future is in genetics.
Okay.
Go straight for ABCBL,
So go
ABCBL,
Go ahead, go
and get a
ahead.
diagnosis.
Just go ahead, run through the slides. Go ahead. I don't think, the only point which I would like to make from this slide for the PGs is that as the genetics is progressing, we have now 6 types of PFIX, and without going into any other detail, it's only the type 3 which has got a high gamma GT. So gamma GT is extremely important whenever you are evaluating. Go to the next slide. This is the follow-up of the current child. This child also had worsening, was advised biliary diversion, did not agree for it, and then this child also died at 4 years of age with end-stage liver disease. Go ahead. So for management of pruritus, what would be the stepwise management in any patient of cholestasis, not this child?
You want to go? You want to go?
Can I go?
Go.
Okay, sir has given me permission. So I think the management of pruritus is really difficult in this group of children. And when you want to do the management of pruritus, you have to have a stepwise approach. First start with ursodeoxycholic acid. The second step would be to consider phenobarbital at a dose or rifampicin. You can choose which one you want to do. If it is possible, the most effective medicine that I find, if it is given correctly, is cholestyramine. But then you need to go to the third line. The whole point is you want to reserve the medicines that you want to use in these children, because sometimes because this is such a heterogeneous group that a combination of medicines sometimes need to be used. The same combination is not effective in each and every child with the same condition that is there. So I think then you go to ondansetron if you have access to. The last one is naloxone, but it has to be a stepwise approach. And sometimes what happens is if you give the child enough time, then they improve with time as well. And I think, because there are distraction strategies that come into place as they get older, mobile phones come into play, toys come into play, and then they get distracted. So I think that's important.
I'd like to make just one comment on cholestyramine. We used a lot of cholestyramine when we did not have knowledge on butyrate and rifampin, and I'm talking about 40 years ago. I thought cholestyramine stops fat absorption.
It has to
fat
be given
absorption.
separately
And
from the other
therefore-
medications.
And
That's a
therefore,
very
when you're
important.
giving your ADEK, anyway you're going to give 10 times the RDA. Am I right?
Yeah.
So that's very important. When you're looking at supplementing ADEK, fat-soluble vitamin, it must be at least 10 times the normal dose of the RDA for requirement. And if you're giving cholestyramine, I don't know how much more you have to give, because
No, you have to ensure that it's not administered along with the
That
other
is right.
medications,
That is right.
because it will stop their absorption.
And
That is right.
that's where the family comes into play, where you need to really trust that the family
some
is doing the correct
antihistaminics
thing. So
thrown
it
in.
is very difficult.
Some antihistaminics thrown in for the itching, really.
That's at the bedtime usually if there's
Bedtime, yeah,
refractory.
but,
So
you know.
biliary diversion, just in one line, Girish, what is
I
the
think
indication and when?
Okay, PFIC2, no indication for biliary diversion. Do not consider it. It is not effective. PFIC1, yes, but do it, if you want to consider doing it, do it at an early stage before the child gets moderate to severe fibrosis, because after that, the effect is not as good and there is likely to be progression of liver disease.
Go ahead, Amrit. So go ahead. I think we don't have the time, but certain features would help us differentiate between these two, but I don't think we can go ahead. Go
with the genetics.
further. Now you can talk about this.
This was the case that we reported where there was a novel truncation mutation in the ATP8B1 gene responsible for a novel PFIC1 variant, where the mutation resulted in a truncated protein from 1,250 amino acids to just 250 amino acids. And the parents were tested, they were found to be heterozygous, and this was a frame shift mutation.
So go to. Yes, this is the child. The diagnosis was later confirmed. So the take-home messages are that GGT should always be included in the liver function test whenever you are evaluating any baby with cholestasis. And if you have cholestasis with pruritus and with a normal to low gamma GT, PFIC 1 or 2 is the most important cause. And if you have a history of pruritus during pregnancy, which is subsiding just after the delivery within a week, or history of pruritus in the mother with intake of oral contraceptive pills, this should hint towards a diagnosis of PFIC. Medical management, as we have discussed, is basically on nutrition, fat-soluble vitamins, calcium, pruritus, stepwise management, followed by early biliary diversion before there is fibrosis and cirrhosis. Genetic testing is the gold standard for confirmation of the diagnosis and type of PFIC. And the spectrum of the disease is very wide. Now, basically, obviously, without going into the details, there could be various mutations where you may have a milder and there could be others where you may have a more severe disease. So the spectrum of disease ranges, as Dr. Merchant has already mentioned, from break to a severe persistence cholestasis.
Anju, I have one important thing to add
Yes.
on here, and I think it is important for the postgraduates. When you're doing your LFT, and I've seen in none of the talks so far anybody has mentioned this, you're doing your albumin and you're doing your globulin. Please look at the globulins carefully. Because here you're giving me a diagnosis of PFIC, and it's a straightforward case. But when you're hunting for a diagnosis, and I don't know whether it's an alpha-1 antitrypsin, whether it's an autoimmune, or whether what it is, if I have the globulins total, albumin and globulin, if I have a hyperglobulinemia with a gamma globulin increase, I put my money on autoimmune and I go with the antibody way. If I do a globulins, always do alpha-1, alpha-2, beta, and gamma. And the levels are 0.3, 0.6, 0.9, 1.2. 90% of alpha-1 is alpha-1 antitrypsin. So if my alpha-1 is low, I chase alpha-1 antitrypsin. I'm just saying it's not relevant to this case, but in an obstructive jaundice in another case. So please don't forget to do the globulin, right, sir?
You want to say something? Giri?
One question to sir.
I want to say thank you very much.
Just one comment. Alpha-1 antitrypsin does
extremely
not
rare.
occur in India, so I
So
think
that
we
was my
should not
question. How
really
frequently we see in India?
No, the published literature
You may
from
publish the first one. So
from
we'll-
All India Institute suggests
think
that
so.
it is an extremely uncommon condition in India. But obviously, I wouldn't say that it does not exist, but it is extremely, extremely rare. So we are lucky that we don't have that as a strong contender.
Thank you.
I would like to thank all of you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Amrit.
Thank you, sir.